We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was produced, the Gadigal People of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. This episode contains discussions of sexual assault. If this raises any issues for you, support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes.
Today we're in Somalia. It's 2008, and after the country's brutal long-time dictator was overthrown 17 years ago, a bloody civil war has raged on. With so many groups vying for control, the emergence of extremist groups like Al-Shabaab and a surge in piracy, it's a very dangerous place to be. But for photojournalist Nigel Brennan, it's exactly where he feels he needs to be. He's here to show the world the unfolding humanitarian crisis. The plan is to stay for 7 days. But on the 4th day, the plan changes dramatically. Nigel and his colleague Amanda Lindhout are dragged out of their vehicle at gunpoint by masked men who plan to keep them hostage. There are only 2 ways out of this. Either a $3 million ransom from a government whose policy is not to pay, or escape from a locked-down house guarded by masked men clutching AK-47s in the middle of one of the world's most dangerous countries. I'm at Middleton. This is Headgame. Today, the ultimate lesson in resilience, strength, and survival. Nigel Brennan, great to have you on my podcast. Thanks for coming. Now, you're a photojournalist. What do you do on a day-to-day?
So photojournalist, obviously someone that works in the media. I sort of started out in regional newspapers and then went into freelance. So I guess as a freelance photojournalist, trying to cover stories that I thought were important and wanted to, I guess, share with the wider world of what was going on, particularly in countries overseas.
You turn this hobby into a career, and then you find yourself being called to go to Somalia. Take me back to that day when whoever, your boss, whoever it was, said to you, right, you're going to Somalia. How did you feel? What was the job role? And did you take it straight away?
So I got a phone call from Amanda, who at that stage was working for Press TV in Iran. So she said, look, I'm thinking about doing a trip into Kenya, Ethiopia and Somalia. Would you be interested in coming along? And for me, it was, I guess, that first thing for me was like, knew obviously Kenya and Ethiopia were fairly safe. Somalia was, a different kettle of fish. But I also had that thing of like, I'd wanted to go into a war zone or a conflict area, like a country that was dangerous and photograph and tell stories. And I guess when Amanda sort of put that to me, it was just like, well, am I going to do this or am I just going to be a dreamer? And I thought, well...
You feel like you had to earn your stripes?
I'd been trying to get into Afghanistan, and I think as a freelancer it was incredibly difficult to try and get embedded in those sorts of things. And then
it's probably safer to go into Afghanistan,
absolutely,
with the top cover that you'd have,
yes,
than it would be to Somalia. And I can tell you that because I've been to both. But
yeah,
no, in hindsight's a great thing. But
hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Probably a lot better going into Afghanistan, because going into Somalia, sort of just as a freelancer, that takes some balls.
It does take some balls. Look, I think in hindsight as well, looking back, and it was like probably a little bit green, a little bit naive, because I think at that stage Somalia was the 3rd most dangerous country in the world. As you said, like Afghanistan, you had US forces and UK forces, and you basically had people there that could help. In Somalia, there was no, like you had aid organisations, but there was absolutely no white or Western personnel there. Mm-hmm. So it was an incredible risk to take, and the plan was a 7-day sort of jaunt in and out, because we knew after 7 days it would be too risky.
7 days in total, is that the 3 countries, or 7 days only for Somalia?
7 days only for Somalia.
That's still quite long.
Yeah.
After 24, 48 hours, people will start sniffing around.
Absolutely. And look, I guess as well as a journalist, you work out who your fix is going to be in country, and we had someone recommended. He was also working with National Geographic journos that were in country at the same time. and we hired security. We had an interpreter, those sorts of things. Again, probably not enough security, but as I said, as freelancers, that's all we could afford was a certain amount of security. And there's also that ethical thing, I think, for journalists too, like driving around in cars in war-torn areas. Do you want to have weapons in your vehicle? Like, you're meant to be neutral, and having a gun in your car is, well, hang on, you're not really neutral anymore. You're taking a side.
So you start off where? You start off in Kenya?
Start off in Kenya, so in Nairobi, organise visas to get into Somalia. So I actually have to forge a document. So my brother's best mate had I guess it was a publication in Brisbane magazine, so I basically ripped his logo off and made a letter up and signed it under Carl's name and gave that to the Somalian embassy and got the visa, and then flew from Nairobi into Mogadishu on one of the dodgiest planes I've ever been. Like, I'm surprised it actually took off and landed.
I've been there too, mate.
Oh, yeah. Oh, like seats sort of going backwards and forwards memories, and chickens and goats, and it's just like, what is this? I think people might have even been smoking on the plane, which,
Yeah.
I can remember sitting on the plane and there was an Italian aid worker who was going through to Somaliland. And he said, "What are you two doing here?" And we're like, "Oh, we're going to Mogadishu." And he's like, "Serious?" It's like, "Yeah, we're journalists." And he's like, "Okay." He said, "You know your head's worth $1 million. That's not attached to your body." And I think that's probably I knew Mogadishu was going to be dangerous and I knew there was potential for kidnap, but I never thought that I would end up being, kidnapped in a country. But I guess that's probably where, things start to pucker up a little bit. And it's just like, okay, this is, we're flying into sort of, I guess, alien territory. And it wasn't until we started descend into Mogadishu and you're looking out the window and you can see basically just over a decade's worth of internal conflict and, buildings that were just decimated and Mogadishu, which they said was the Paris of Africa, getting to eventually landing at Mogadishu airport and getting off the plane and getting into the carousel and just seeing it was complete pandemonium and mayhem and, there's security there that are beating people with sticks to get them away from the luggage carousel. And
a bit of a reality check.
Oh, it was. It was like I felt like a complete alien. It was just like, I should not be here. This.
Oh, as soon as you landed, you thought, I shouldn't be here.
Oh, it wasn't. I felt completely out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And
what were you hoping to capture? Why did you go there in the first place? What was the task or what was the mission that you needed to do?
For Amanda and I, the task was like the humanitarian crisis that was going on. There was a famine that was about to hit the country again. And for us, we wanted to try and capture some of the fighting between Al-Shabaab and the African Union forces. So I guess, again, as a green young journalist, it was like, I want to get out to the front lines and capture some of what's going on because by that stage, Somalia was sort of a country that was forgotten about. I guess after Black Hawk Down and those sorts of things, which everyone's aware of, it really sort of fell out of the media cycle. And particularly for us, one of the interesting stories was how food aid is brought into the country. So, food aid from America and Australia and Canada is handed over to a third party who basically has to pay for that food aid. Like, he has to hand over money for it and he doesn't get paid until he delivers it to the destination where it's got to go to. And it's like, that's a lot of risk for one person. And then you've got Al-Shabaab that are, raiding those sorts of things. So we wanted to sort of see how food aid from Western countries is actually dispersed and does it actually get to where it is, and how corrupt is that whole sort of experience for the middleman, really.
So that was the mission to capture the
the day we left, the day we were actually kidnapped, we were heading out of Mogadishu. So everyone said Mogadishu was relatively safe. I think it was like 8 square blocks around Villa Somalia, which is where the President's Palace is, and was controlled by African Union forces. They said outside of that, it's sort of militia-run areas. But the day we were kidnapped, we were travelling to Afgoya, which is, I think, 40 k's outside of Mogadishu, and there were 5 internally displaced camps there. So I think there was about 700,000 people that had been displaced from Mogadishu because of the fighting, living in those 5 camps.
So you land. Do your security travel with you, or do they meet you at the airport with a fixer? How when you land, are you by yourself and you've got to meet the security team and the fixer, or are you travelling with them?
No, so we meet the security team once we land in Mogadishu.
Yep.
So we meet Abdi, who becomes our sub-fixer, I guess.
Yeah.
So he speaks English. We also meet the driver and our security detail.
First impressions?
Abdi was like really nice, great English, felt sort of quite secure, I guess, that knowing that we had security as well. Again, I think, the reality check of as we're leaving the airport with our bags, there's quite a high ranking officer from the African Union forces that are in country, and he's like, what are you guys doing here? Explain to him, that we're journalists and that we're here for 7 days, and he gives us a number. He says, if you get in trouble, give us a call.
Yeah. You leave the airport. How many days are you in country until you get that knock on the door and your whole world turns upside down?
So we spend the first 3 days basically connecting with, I guess, people trying to get access to hospitals and
that's what it's about, isn't it? It's just getting access, talking with fixers, trying to get interviews with
locals,
different people, and all of that's outside of your control, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got to rely on other people to get you into these locations, right? And
yeah.
To see
so
these
we're completely reliant on Adjuce, who's the main fixer.
Yeah.
We explain to him what we want to do and the stories that we want to cover, and obviously saying to him we want to get out to the front line and sort of see the fight in between Al-Shabaab and the African Union forces. He's like, not a chance, not going to happen. We're like, we want to go to Bakara Market, which is a really famous market in Somalia, and they have a part of that market is a gun market. Again, he said, that's not going to happen.
They're knocking you back.
So that's really frustrating. Yeah. So we end up, we get to a couple of feeding stations where there's thousands of people obviously waiting for food aid, that sort of stuff. I think one of those locations, I think about half an hour after we leave, there's a mortar attack. So then we then go to one of the main hospitals in Mogadishu, which, by standards of Western countries it looks just, how can I explain this? Pretty shabby.
Yeah.
Very limited resources, doctors are run off their feet, lots of flies around, lots of infection, those sorts of things.
Yeah, lack of doors, lack of windows.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're in a hospital where there's fighting around and those sorts of things as well. So, yeah, we managed to get 3 days, get out with African Union forces, I think on the third day, which was interesting as well, to spend a bit of time with them. And, I think they're probably just as terrified as we are.
And to be fair, knowing the African forces, they're not the most capable or the best
trained.
Trained, and with everything that the lack of resources that they have as well, the lack of training.
Yes.
So there you're on the back foot already.
Yeah. So we managed to get 3 days of shooting in, and I guess trying to create some stories and lining some stuff up for the next 4 days. And then obviously day 4, we'd organised with Adjuce to travel outside of Mogadishu to Afgoya, to the smallest IDP camp we wanted to go and visit. So there was something like 50 to 60,000 people in that camp. To give you, I guess, an overview, there's no running water, there's no electricity. We'd heard that during the night Al-Shabaab were doing raids into these camps and basically raping women. There was a small, I guess, hospital in this smaller camp with a woman that was running it. We wanted to go and basically photograph her and see what she was doing. So we'd organised this with Adjuce the day before. He said, because we were leaving Mogadishu, he said, you're going to need extra security detail because you are now going into a complete militia-run area. So we'd organised extra security detail for that day. And we'd planned to leave after the National Geographic guys that were staying in the hotel with us. So there were 4 journalists, we were split into teams. They were heading past Afgoya, so we were leaving after them in the morning. So yeah, wake up on the morning of the 4th day feeling fairly nervous.
And security's bumped up, you're feeling nervous, you're just going outside of Mogadishu. There's, you've sort of been pre-warned.
Well, and there's more risk in doing that.
Absolutely.
And I'm feeling quite, I wasn't anxious, or I sort of, it was like my intuition was telling me.
Yeah, it's a gut feeling, isn't it?
It was trying to tell
me
me something.
When you went out that airport, I get exactly what you mean. There's something that you go, oof.
Yeah.
Some of this.
So we're in the hotel waiting for everyone to get ready, the drivers and security and that sort of stuff. And I'm like, I think I'm going to have diarrhea. And I'm, running to the toilet, nothing's coming out. And for me, that was like intuition saying, something shit's about to happen to you. So we jump in the car. The Nat Geo team have left. So we were always meant to be the second car behind them. We jump in our vehicle. We take off. We get to basically the outskirts of Mogadishu, where the Mogadishu University is. You've got African Union troops that are stationed there. You can see all the sandbags and guys behind machine guns and those sorts of things. The car stops, and our security detail that are in the vehicle, basically we're told pretty much at that point that they have to leave us, and we now have to travel 5 kilometres without security detail until we pick up our next security detail.
Did that not raise alarm bells?
Oh, it absolutely does.
So there's an inside job going on right there.
Yeah.
Right? Or something along those lines. Yes. Because, you get your security detail. The idea is that they stay with you.
They stay with you, yeah.
Eyes on, ears on,
and it was
feet on the boots on the ground.
Well, it was explained to us that because they were seen as government forces, they can't travel into a militia-run area, so that they would basically be stationed there. They would wait until we've come back from the day and we'd pick them up. So again, having done hostile environment training, we say if the plan changes, you basically need to stop what you're doing, think about the consequences, think about the risks. And if it's too risky, go home and have a cup of tea.
Yeah, red flags basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Amanda and I had a really quick conversation. We were like, we've come all this way. We really want to get this story. And we made the decision that we'd punch through. And
Is that because you've been getting, excuse my French, shit stories before, and you're like, right, this is the first meaty one we're going to get.
Yeah.
This is the first one that we're going to
I think
really sink our teeth into.
For the first 3 days, it was this sort of drip-fed stuff that they were sort of, I think
almost just pleasing you with little things,
to keep us busy while Adjuce was working with the Nat Geo guys, getting the stuff that we were sort of hoping or wanting to get as well. So it was just like, you guys just can have the scraps off the table. We'll just keep you busy.
So the decision wasn't that hard. You were like, let's just go for it. We're here now. Let's go. Made
a decision. There's 5 of us in the car. We leave our security detail and we basically punch down the road. I'm mucking around with my camera, basically looking at the images I've taken from the day before, deleting images slowly. So I had all the shots while I was with the African Union forces. I can remember hearing Amanda and Abdi, who was our interpreter, sort of speaking. By this stage, we'd created quite a good bond with Abdi. He was good fun, liked to laugh, and they were sort of singing and mucking around. And I can remember looking up over the driver's shoulder and seeing a car flashing its lights, because they told us that we'd obviously intercept another security detail, and I just presumed that was the car that was our security detail. Didn't really take much notice, went back to my camera, and then as we got to that car, we stopped, and then I sort of looked up and looked over my right shoulder and just saw a guy fully mask-faced with an AK-47 literally sort of inches away from the glass. And then the next thing, all 4 doors are ripped open, I'm dragged out of the vehicle, driver, the guy who's in the front seat with the driver, and then Abdi and Amanda, who are in the back, were all brought around to my side of the car, pushed face down into the dirt, AK-47 at the back of the head. Very quickly, all 5 of us are bundled into the back seat of this Land Cruiser. I've got this really big hostage taker who's now sitting beside us, so there's 6 of us in the back seat. I've got Amanda on my lap. 2 guys jump in the front. One's got a pistol pointing back, and then 2 young guys, again mask face, at the back, who are pointing AK-47s at the back of our heads.
Did you have time to realise what was going on, or before you knew it, you was in the back of the Land Cruiser?
Look, I saw him, and then I looked around and I saw more guys with guns, and it was like, I think the whole masked face was just like, this ain't good. Yeah. So basically they surrounded the car, doors all open, everyone's ripped out, thrown on the ground, very quickly thrown back into the vehicle. And then literally someone jumps in the driver's seat and
takes you.
Yeah, and instead of driving down the road, they just go cross country.
So they take you straight off grid.
Like, it felt like we're doing 150. We're probably only doing 80, but it was rough. Yeah. Like, I can remember sort of putting my hands up on the roof to brace because I've got Amanda on me, and we're just cross country, driving across scrub bush, that sort of stuff.
And at this point, is there any sort of signals that you're trying to give to the others, or any sort of, or you just like, your head is everywhere? You don't know what the hell is going on.
Like, for me, I sort of describe it like your brain goes to cotton wool.
Yeah,
Like you can't even think. It's just that
goes to mush, doesn't it?
It does. It's like it's not panic. It's just I think
it's shock. It's pure shock of you not
disbelief.
realizing what's going on. You know, it's you can't. Your brain can't compute what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
It's like it takes so long before you actually realize, wow, I'm in a whole world of pain right now.
Yeah,
you know, things are going downhill rapidly.
They basically demand everyone's mobile phones.
Yeah.
I don't give them mine, like because it's in the back of my jeans, so I can't actually get to it. And again, like trying to work out timeframes is really difficult because your concept of time just goes, to shit completely.
There's self-preservation right now, aren't you? You're right.
So there's obviously the car in front of us that we'd stop for, who's now sort of the lead car. We're behind that. After a few minutes, we pull up. Amanda's ripped out of the car and she's put into the front car. So then I guess, my fear sort of goes up several notches because it's like they've just taken my friend and colleague who's female and they've separated us, which is not I have no control of what's going on with her.
So you're all completely separated from each other?
And no, at this stage, so there's the five of us that were in the car are all in the back seat. Amanda's the only one that's taken out of the vehicle and put in the lead vehicle. So we're trying to talk and the guy's saying, stop talking. Like, they're not actually saying, they're just shh. Again, we drive through bush and we're sort of coming into little villages on dirt roads and then off to the bush and then into a village. And so they're really trying to
disorientate you. Yeah,
absolutely disorientate us. We pull up again and then I'm pulled out of the vehicle and I'm put into the lead vehicle with Amanda. And that's the first time I meet one of the head guys called Ahmed, who speaks absolutely fluent English, introduces himself, says everything's okay, no need to worry. The commanders basically want to meet you and see who you are and understand what you're doing in the country.
Did you believe him?
Maybe I wanted to believe him.
Yeah,
because
you do. You want to humanize yourself, don't you? You want to, there's that hope. That's when things start to get tough.
The first person who didn't have a mask on either.
Right.
So it was sort of like I could see his face, which was also like terrifying in a way. It's like, because I don't want to see your face because now I can identify you.
Yeah.
And I think they're the sorts of thoughts that are just flooding through your head. It's just like, what are they doing with us? And he said, look, we're going to take you to a compound. The commanders of our group are they want to meet with you, want to understand who you are, why you're in the country.
Is anyone hysterical? How was Amanda at this stage?
No, she was like none of us.
Just all of you were just playing staying quiet all through that journey and just until
I think Amanda and I are in the back seat. We're sort of holding hands, but not hysterical at all. I think trying to be calm and just look. I think also that initial stage of shock is you just
go with it, don't you? Because you're scared you're going to die.
Yeah.
You kick off or there's that whole thing. You don't want to upset the people that have just now in control of your life, basically.
Yeah.
They decide what happens to you. They decide where you go. They decide whether you live or die.
Yeah.
It's that shock is right. It's almost submissive, I would say. It
is in a way.
Yeah.
I think just playing the game with him and we're then taken to a compound and it was in a small little village, with a massive sort of 10, 12 high-foot wall with metal gates. We drive into there. I'm taken out of the car, frog marched into, there's a low building with 3 rooms in it. I'm frog marched into the end room. Amanda asked to go to the toilet straight away. So she obviously has her card from her camera that has photographs with the African Union forces on it. So she's trying to delete that in the toilet. They obviously think she's trying to hide something.
Why did they catch her doing it?
No, they didn't catch her doing it, but when she was brought back to the room, within minutes they come in and they take her to the room next door. I can hear her scream as they she tells me after she comes back, but they put their hands down her boobs and then her hands into her pants to see.
So she's being sexually assaulted at this stage?
Yeah.
Wow, and what's happening to you? You can hear her screaming.
So, I'm in the room next door.
How does that make you feel?
Pretty terrified.
Terrified,
yeah. Because it's like, well, hang on, in the car you said everything was okay, this is completely different.
And did you feel a sense of handover? Because that handover can a method to really disrupt the individual.
Well, I think when we got to that compound, obviously seeing more guys with more guns, it's just like, okay, they've been waiting for us. So there's now more people involved, put into that room, obviously doors shut. Again, so you sort of now in a room by yourself. Amanda was in there for the first period, for the first few minutes, and then she was dragged out, and then she's brought back. She's in tears, explains that she's been sexually assaulted.
So they put you back together?
Yeah, put us back together.
And are you talking? Are you trying to come up with a plan, or are you just trying to figure out what the hell is going on?
Trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And then I think, after a short period of time, it's like, fuck, we've been kidnapped.
Yeah, the penny drops, right? It's like, you've just been sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
The situation has changed. We've been kidnapped. They think we're someone that we're not. Yeah. Now we have to convince them that we're just, journalists for journalists.
During that first few hours of being in the compound, they come in, they basically want passports, they want money. Both of us had left our passports at the hotel because there was no point in going out in the field with your passport. I had $100 on me. I think Amanda had less than that, but, went through my camera bag. They left all of my cameras, didn't touch any of that, but they were just looking for documentation. Obviously asked us questions of who we were, what we were doing in the country. So I explained, I'm Nigel Brennan, I'm an Australian photojournalist, here for 7 days. Amanda does the same thing. She's obviously from Canada. They bring us water. Do you want anything else? And I'm like, yeah, I want a pack of cigarettes because I'm going to smoke like a champion.
Yeah, ask. Listen, if they offer, ask. Yeah. You don't know when that's going to be your last meal, your last smoke, your last drink. Yeah. It's serious things. So if they're offering, always take.
Yeah. So we're in the room, chain smoking, trying to work out what's going on. A group of men come in once it's dark, and basically I think there was 4 of them. So Ahmed, one of the guys that was involved in the kidnapping, whose face I can't see. There's another guy that comes in. He was introduced to me as Adam. He also speaks English. Mm-hmm. Another guy that was, I think he was waiting at the compound, Captain Yaya was how he was introduced.
Captain Yaya, Adam. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And it's funny, as time went on, Amanda and I actually had nicknames for all of them so that we could talk about them without them knowing. But they sit down and they, obviously ask us what we're doing, why we're there. They accuse us of being spies. And we're like, if you guys have got, obviously, the internet, go onto Google my name, Google Amanda's name, you'll find all of this information. And then they say, basically, because you're from Australia, Nigel, and Amanda, you're from Canada, because both of your countries are at war against Islam, we're going to hold you for ransom and we're going to demand money from your governments.
Was that a moment that you thought, we're going to be here for a long time? Because ransom asking, they can go on for months and go on for years.
Well, I guess...
Did you think to yourself, we're in it for the long haul?
Look, to be honest, at that stage, I was probably thinking this could last for a couple of months. Never did I think it was going to last for 15 months. I was also having...
months.
Also having, I guess, thoughts of Daniel Pearl, who was beheaded in Pakistan, those sorts of things. So at that stage, they didn't tell us how much they wanted. But they said, we're going to ask money. We don't want money from your family. We're only interested in money from your governments. And I knew that both Australia and Canada, as part of the Five Eyes, which is US, UK, Canada, New Zealand and Australia, will not pay a ransom for one of their citizens because they believe it basically creates an economy for that sort of industry. Yeah. So I explained, the Australian government will not pay you 1 cent for my life.
How does that make you feel, knowing that?
I understand why they make that decision, because it does create an economy. And
it's just money.
Well, it's just money, but I guess, does it then put a target on certain nationalities? I guess over the last decade, you've seen the French and the Germans and European nations who do pay. And it's not like a kidnapper, targets specific nationalities. They just grab. And if they're fortunate enough, if they're fortunate enough to have someone from Europe, then they know that they're going to get money from a government, even though those governments will say we don't pay.
Yeah.
Whereas, you look at what happened in Syria with ISIS and with the Brits and the Americans that were obviously kidnapped, and, very sadly, majority of them all end up dying as propaganda videos for ISIS. So
Did you ever think you would be part of that statistic? Did you ever think that you were going to have your head
I think absolutely.
lobbed off?
Absolutely. At the start, it was, like I said, thinking about Daniel Pearl, and it's like capturing a Canadian and Australian whose forces are in Afghanistan and Iraq and places like that. It is like...
Doesn't bode well.
It doesn't bode well. And we didn't know who we were dealing with at that stage. Like they said, they were the Somali Mujahideen. So it's like, have they captured two citizens from nations that they can make,
examples out of?
But also I think in the back of my head was the reality of I knew my government wasn't going to pay for my ransom, that it was going to fall on my family. So mum and dad had basically 3 years earlier sold their family farm for quite a substantial amount of money. I think it was about $6 million. And I knew Amanda's family had basically no money at all. So the reality was, yes, they're telling us they want money from the Australian government and the Canadian government. If they don't get that, eventually they're going to go for the families. Mm-hmm. So I think for me it was that moral dilemma of I was going to destroy my mum and dad's retirement fund. And I think
retirement, full stop.
Yeah.
Their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Like my entire family, did get caught up in this whole, I guess, experience of my kidnapping. And then there was the ethical question that sort of hit me as well during those first few months of, do I want my family to pay a ransom for me? Is that ethically okay? Is that money going to be used for means of this group buying more arms and innocent people being killed? Like, great, the white person gets his life back and black Africans end up dying because of, potentially a $2 million ransom payment that goes to this group that they use that money to continue their jihad in Somalia.
Wow. So how long were you in captivity before your parents were told? It would have been, what, days?
Hours, I think.
Hours, yeah.
So
straight away onto the Australian embassy.
Well, it's interesting too. I think, looking back at, were these guys professional? Had they done this before? It was probably not. Because I think in that first meeting with the head guys, they said, we need the number for the Australian government. And I was like, call 1300 DFAT? I don't know. And the only number I had was mum and dad's landline. Like, that was the only number that I knew off the top of my head. So I gave them that. Amanda obviously gave them her father's number in Canada. And I think it was pretty much within the first 24 hours. It was a Sunday night because I know my sister was at mum and dad's having dinner with them, which was sort of a family tradition. On a Sunday night, phone rang, my sister's answered it. And Adam, the guy that was part of that initial group, that commander group, he ended up being their communicator for the kidnapping group. Sister picks up the phone and basically says, I have your brother Nigel with Amanda Lindhout. We're demanding $1.5 million each US, so $3 million ransom demand. If you don't pay within the next 24 hours, we'll execute them.
Wow. Ant here, and I hope you're enjoying Nigel's phenomenal story. I don't often do two-part interviews, but this story is unlike anything I've ever heard before. So join me next week for the second half and hear what happened next. Thanks for listening to Head Game.